Well, they talk about pain like it is something you recover from. They think you can just patch it up, walk it off, move on. But you didn't just take pain, you took impact. You absorbed hits that would have erased 99% of humanity and still found a way to breathe like nothing happened. You were handed storms that had no mercy, nights that refused to end, and endings that arrived without warning. Yet here you are, still standing, still rising, still becoming something they'll never be ready for. They keep trying to diagnose you, like you are supposed to make sense to them. They keep trying to understand you using vocabulary that doesn't stretch beyond comfort. But there is no definition for a soul that has been shattered and rebuilt from the inside out. There is no category for someone who has looked at their own ruins and decided to start rearranging the rubble into pillars. You didn't just walk through darkness. You rearranged the shadows. You adapted to the silence. You learned to read echoes. Every wound you survived turned into wisdom. Every scar became a sentence of scripture written beneath your skin. They don't know the chapters of your story where you begged yourself to keep breathing. They don't know how many times your heart tried to shut down just to feel relief. They don't know how many times you whispered, just one more step into the void, because while the world turned its back, you turned inward. While they stopped believing in you, you learned to believe in survival. You didn't have a hero. You became your own, and that alone rewrote every rule they thought they understood about you. They think pain is weakness because they've only tasted the surface of it. They don't know the flavor of the kind that eats through bone. They don't know the sting of silence that feels like a verdict. They don't know the ache of disappointment that shows up every morning with new reasons to quit. You know, and knowing changed you. You didn't toughen up, you transformed. There's a difference. Hardness breaks. Strength adapts. You adapted. You became fluent in resilience, in the art of rising without applause. You learned that healing isn't a pretty moment. It's a battlefield. It's a negotiation between who you were, who you lost, and who you now refuse to ever be again. You stopped letting people measure your worth through their comfort zones. You stopped accepting love that required shrinking. You stopped making excuses for people who never tried to understand you. That wasn't bitterness. That was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes only when you've stared honesty in the face and it didn't blink. Your greatest upgrade wasn't confidence. It was comprehension. You see through intentions now. You sense desire in the tone. You detect disrespect in the silence. You don't fall for patterns anymore. You read patterns. You don't chase explanations anymore. You recognize accountability when it's absent. You don't beg for closure anymore. You create distance. People call you cold because they can no longer manipulate your warmth. People call you changed because they no longer recognize the version of you they once controlled. But you didn't become colder. You became clearer. You didn't change. You became what healing always intended. You used to give too much, now you give with awareness. You used to forgive too fast. Now you observe consistency. You used to be afraid of disappointing others. Now you're committed to not disappointing yourself. There is a difference between being alive and truly living. You learned that the hard way. You learned that survival doesn't mean numbness. It means learning how to feel without letting the feeling consume you. You learned that strength isn't loud. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is remain calm, where once they would have shattered. The world sees control. But you know this is not control. It is mastery. Mastery over your emotions, mastery over your reactions, mastery over your energy. You stopped wasting effort on battles meant to distract you. You stopped turning your heart into a proving ground. You stopped allowing people to access parts of you they did not earn. No look at you walking through rooms like you own the blueprint. Moving through uncertainty like someone who knows exactly what happens after collapse, rebirth, breathing like someone who knows that oxygen wasn't always guaranteed. And they noticed, oh, they noticed. The whispers soften when you enter the room. The eyes that once rolled now drop. Conversations shift tone. People choose their words with caution, because it's one thing to doubt someone, it's another to witness them rise through the very obstacles meant to bury them. Your existence has become a subtle disruption, a living contradiction, a reminder that those who counted you out miscalculated the math of resilience. You are not the sum of what happened to you. You are the product of how you rebuilt afterward. They expected you to break. You bent. They expected you to beg. You withdrew. They expected reactions. You responded with results. And nothing intimidates the unhealed more than someone who found healing without them. You didn't walk away angry. You walked away aware. You didn't elevate to prove them wrong. You elevated because you discovered who you were when they weren't there to interrupt the process. They think you're quiet now, but your silence is a strategy. Words used to be your offering. Now they are your weapon, used only with precision. You don't waste breath trying to convince anyone of what truth already proves. You don't correct lies. You let results handle that. You don't expose people. You let their behavior do the introduction. You are no longer a reaction. You are a revelation. And revelation is not comfortable for those who built their reality around your doubt. You carry yourself like someone who knows exactly what they survived. You move like someone who refuses to repeat that suffering. Your boundaries are no longer negotiable. Your standards no longer shrink to fit someone's convenience. Your empathy no longer excuses disrespect. Your love no longer apologizes for its depth. This is what evolution looks like when it happens internally. First, it's the kind of transformation that changes how the earth spins beneath your feet. Some people used to look down on you. Now they look up because they have to. The angle changed. The power shifted, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it where no one was watching. They thought they buried you. They didn't know you were a seed. They thought you'd crumble. They didn't understand you were built from collisions. They thought you'd stay broken. They didn't expect your pieces to sharpen into a crown. You grew in silence. You healed in private. You evolved without witnesses. And now the world has to adjust to the version of you that pain forged. You're not fearless. You're familiar with fear. You're not unbreakable. You just refuse to stay broken. You didn't become perfect. You became prepared. Now the same voices that once doubted you speak your name with caution. Because they finally see the truth. Growth is not polite. Transformation is not comfortable. And pain is not something you recover from. Pain is something you rise from. Stronger, smarter, transformed beyond recognition. You've stepped into a league where scars are certificates, where silence is authority, where resilience is the loudest statement in the room. There is nothing left to prove, only things left to build. Let them wonder how you're still here. Let them question how you rose. Let them rewrite their narratives to make sense of what they never expected. You didn't just survive the impact. You became the impact. And they will feel that truth every time they speak your name. They still try to tell the story like they were the main characters, like your survival was accidental, like your transformation was just timing or luck. They refuse to admit the truth because it would expose the lie they've been living. That strength comes easily. That resilience is handed out like a gift instead of carved from grief. They watched you walk through fire. And they call it coincidence that you came out glowing. They watched you rebuild yourself alone, and they call it luck that the structure never collapsed again. But nothing about you is accidental. Nothing about your evolution is an oversight by the universe. This version of you was earned. You paid for it in silence, with tears that evaporated before they ever hit the floor, with fears you never confessed, and with willpower you forged while the world assumed you were sleeping. They don't understand how someone can rise without applause, how someone can grow without validation, how someone can choose excellence without being seen. They still think motivation comes from attention, but you learn to create it from emptiness. You lived through the kind of nights where dreams didn't feel possible, where hope felt like a rumor, where your future felt too quiet to trust. And yet you kept going. You repeated breaths that didn't want to be repeated. You stepped into days that didn't deserve your effort. You woke up when the world hadn't earned your presence, and slowly, quietly, the impossible shifted in your direction. Your rebirth wasn't dramatic. It was disciplined. You took the shattered pieces of yourself and tested every one of them. You rebuilt your identity like a blueprint only you could read. You stopped chasing people and started chasing your own potential. You stopped waiting to be chosen and realized you already were by life itself. Growth doesn't need witnesses, it just needs commitment. There came a day, and maybe you didn't even notice it, where your heart stopped breaking and started building, where your questions stopped spiraling and started sharpening, where your doubts stopped screaming and started stepping aside. That day was quiet. That day was sacred. That day rewrote everything. And ever since, the world has been reacting to your evolution, not the other way around. They try to minimize your story because the truth makes them uncomfortable. They saw you at your lowest, and they would prefer you stay there. It made them feel safe. It made them feel taller. It made them feel superior in their own untested comfort. But you were never competing with them. You were competing with who you used to be, and you won. Your silence now isn't emptiness, it's efficiency. You don't waste words trying to explain wisdom to those who haven't earned the lesson. You don't waste energy trying to convince people who only understand projections. You don't waste emotion on those who never gave you anything but exhaustion. Your presence has become selective, your peace protected, your time priceless. Not because you think you're above anyone, but because you finally understand what you bring to the table, and you're done seating people who only showed up to take. You learned boundaries not as walls, but as filters. You learned love not as surrender, but as partnership. You learned trust not as blindness, but as observation. You don't demand respect, you simply remove access where respect does not exist. And that shift alone has rewritten every relationship you carry forward. Some people miss the old version of you, the one who put others first even when it hurt. The one who kept giving even while empty. But that version of you is gone, and may they never meet it again. Because that version needed saving. This version doesn't. This version knows that loyalty without honesty is dependency. That love without effort is distraction. That promises without proof are excuses. You stopped accepting crumbs from people who feast elsewhere. You stopped romanticizing potential. You stopped worshiping inconsistency. And now those who once took you for granted must live with the consequence of their own neglect. Your absence. You don't even have to announce it. Distance does the talking for you. They feel it in the gaps where you used to overextend. They hear it in the silence where you used to over-explain. They see it in the elevation that happened the moment you stopped lowering yourself. Growth changed your language. Where you once said, "I understand," you now say, "I notice." Where you once said, "I'm sorry," you now say, "I'm not available." Where you once said, "It's fine," you now say, It's not aligned. Where you once said, "I'll try," you now say, "I've chosen." That's the thing about healing. It turns permission into decision, and your decisions now are no longer made out of fear. They are made out of remembrance. You remember the cost of ignoring your intuition. You remember the price of staying too long. You remember what it felt like to break, and you refuse to pay that price twice. Others can't decode you because they are still learning a language you mastered in silence. They still operate from insecurity. You operate from experience. They still seek validation. You seek alignment. They still fear change. You became the definition of it. Some will admire you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will be intimidated by you. Some will drift away because they can no longer approach you with the same inconsistency. That is the blessing of becoming who you needed most. Your transformation becomes a filter. Your elevation becomes separation, not because you're pushing people away, but because you finally stopped chasing those who chose not to stay. Look at how you move now. You enter spaces with quiet authority. You speak only when your words have weight. You listen not to respond, but to understand. You no longer rush decisions. You calculate outcomes. You no longer underestimate energy. You observe patterns. You walk like someone who has learned how to hold themselves together, even when the world falls apart. You walk like someone who found balance in the ashes. You walk like someone who has nothing left to prove, just everything left to build. This is why people feel small when they try to belittle you, because their attempts reveal more about them than about you. This is why gossip doesn't reach you. It only circulates beneath your altitude. This is why jealousy forms in corners, because envy avoids direct sunlight. You've become too grounded to be knocked off course, too self-aware to be manipulated, too healed to be provoked, too focused to be distracted. The strength they see now isn't loud, it's layered. They see the confidence. They feel the presence. They notice the discipline. But what they don't see is everything beneath it. The nights where you rebuilt your heartbeat. The mornings where you forced yourself to rise. The battles no one knows you won. They don't know the weight behind your calm. You are not intimidating. You are the realization that comfort doesn't create greatness. You are living evidence that suffering can sharpen into skill, that heartbreak can harden into honor, that pain can polish purpose. People who haven't been forged in fire will always fear the flame you carry. They will call you different like it's an insult, but it's a crown. They will call you unpredictable like it's a flaw, but it's strategy. They will call you distant like you're hiding, but you're choosing peace over performance. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Let them rewrite their stories to fit the truth they tried to bury. Because every lie they once spoke about you has now become the proof they were wrong. You don't need to correct them. You are the correction. You don't need to respond. You are the response. You don't need to prove anything. You are the proof, and proof does not apologize for existing. This is your evolution, not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable, and they can feel it even if they'll never admit it. They still glance over their shoulders when your name is mentioned. They still pause mid-sentence when someone brings you up. They pretend they're not watching, not wondering, not comparing, but silence has a way of exposing what the mouth refuses to confess. You are no longer the person they pitied. You are the person they study. Because the last time they checked, you were supposed to be broken. Yet here you stand, not just standing, commanding. They can't wrap their minds around the fact that you rebuilt yourself without making noise. They saw the struggle, they saw the exhaustion, but they never saw the skill being shaped underneath it. They didn't realize your quiet was really your construction phase. And now, the finished architecture leaves them breathless. You don't have to shout to make the world notice anymore. Your presence speaks in frequencies only confidence can translate. Your energy enters a room before your body ever does. That's the change, not louder, just undeniable. Pain didn't make you bitter. It made you better, not perfect, precise, not cold, clear, not heartless, healed. You aren't afraid of endings anymore. You've lived through them. You carry closure in your stride now. You've learned that some people leave not because you lacked value, but because they couldn't afford your future. You didn't lose them. You outgrew what they needed you to be. They still expect you to collapse the way you once did. They still wait for the old triggers to break you, but nothing that comes now can rival what you've already survived. You evolved beyond the version of you that pain tried to contain. That's why the air shifts when you walk by. Not because you're intimidating, but because you remind others of what they haven't conquered yet. Your survival holds up a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. Not everyone will clap for you. Growth exposes those who never wanted you to rise. But applause was never the goal. Elevation is. So let them whisper. Let them misunderstand. Let them build false narratives in rooms you'll never set foot in again. None of that alters your trajectory, because you're not fueled by attention anymore. You're powered by purpose. You're done auditioning for roles you've already outgrown. You're done proving your heart to people who never offered theirs. You're done dimming your light just to make others comfortable in their shadows. Your story doesn't end with survival. Your story begins with rebirth. Look at you now, unbreakable, not because you never shattered, but because you stitched your own soul back together and taught it how to shine. From here on out, you're not rising to escape the past. You are rising because you were always built for heights where pain can't follow. The world thought your story was over, but you were just getting started.